Hi, everybody. How are you doing tonight? I am Joanne with For Better For Worse Dog Training.
And I'm Lisa with Canine Defined.
So Nancy should be with us here in a little while. She's late coming in. I am also late and I haven't turned my phone down, so let me do that. Oh, goodness. All right. So we are talking about building and maintaining trust tonight. I know I like this one a lot. Hi, Ronnie. Hi, Sue. I like this one a lot because I'm late because I just spent 11 hours at a judging a nosework trial. And how do we in dog sports and in life build trust between our canine companions and ourselves? And that goes both ways. How do we learn to trust our dogs to make the right decision, and how do they learn to trust us? They're not gonna get in trouble or be wrong, or there's a time and a place for all of those things, but how do we really set the stage where our dogs aren't afraid to make mistakes sometimes?
Yep. I think, and I think a lot of times we don't really consider that aspect of it, right? It's like, this and you should know this. And I think then you get into, proofing. Have you proofed it enough? Do you understand your dog's body language? Do you trust your dog and their skill set based upon where you are? So there's a lot to it. And a lot of it is just, it's part of relationship building. When you first start, and I'll talk because I have a puppy. He's 10 weeks old now, and I know I'm crazy, but whatever. It is what it is. Why not live dangerously? See, there you go. But what happens is, one of the things that I found out, and I happened to notice with him. Hey, Nance.
Hey.
One of the things I noticed with him was that he was a little sensitive with dogs. And then I found out from the breeder that he had a little interaction with another dog that wasn't super nice initially. And so he's a little bit sensitive. So I noted that immediately. And then when he decided to come to me, I just socially supported him. I'm like, I got you, we're good, etc. But you have to recognize it, right? When the dog is like, I need help, or, I'm concerned, and so forth. And that's part of your building trust in your training.
Hi, everybody. I'm coming to you from sunny Dayton, Ohio. I had a great weekend teaching nosework, so apologize for being tardy. And this was just a really good topic and kind of timely for when you're seeing different dogs and different teams work their dogs, and how important trust is. And when you see it, it's really clear and nice it's really great to see it when it's there, right? And you also notice when it's not there as well, but it's really fun. Anyway, Joanne, were you going to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I have a very needy Vizsla in the background, so I just got home from the trail. So
get out of here.
Hang on, sorry. So, yeah, kind of how Lisa was mentioning, right? I think that relationship sort of starts to build from the very, very beginning, whether it's a puppy or a rescue dog or whatever it is that you have. First that you meet the dog. I feel like too, even as an instructor, we are also trying to build trust in the dogs that we see week after week, right? We get a lot of the fearful, shy, I don't know about you, I might want to bite you. Dogs that come through our place, right? And I don't know about you guys, but usually by week 2 or 3, they're like, we're not besties, but you're all right to be near me because I trust that you're not going to touch me or pet me or all those things that I'm clearly telling you I don't enjoy. So, going through some of the new things, I think at least with environmental dogs or dogs that do have some issues, part of the trust is like, I hear you, I'm going to leave you alone. So I know a lot of us have sporting dogs, and so we're used to the talking about sports, right? But even if you have a puppy from a breeder, a puppy from a rescue, or a dog, um, bringing them home and just letting them decompress and have some time starts that process. And
Mhm.
and part of what that entails is nothing,
Right.
right? I'll let you out, I'll feed you. That's it. Enjoy the sights, the smells, the sounds of my house, but you go ahead and take your time.
Get acclimated. Right.
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 And that is
She's froze.
She is
Oh.
frozen. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Yep. I think, well, I'll just jump on in, but I think it has it's true of any dog coming in, right? Whether you're, and I do day school where dogs come in, we have to first get to know them pretty well before we start really. So the first day they're with us, it's just a matter of, who are you? What's going on? How do you feel about this? Can you eat cookies? How's your behavior? How's your, you can't just jump right in and say, I'm okay. And you'll learn to trust me, because that's not really how it works, right? Developing relationships take time, and it's not something that you can rush depending on the individual involved, right?
Yep. And I know I still work for corporate America. I work for John Deere during the day. We just went through last month something called insights training, which there's 100 of them out there, of the like personality, who are you in the workspace, right? And so this one was actually really cool because it was talking about know who you are, know who you work with. And it's not just about knowing who you work with, it's about trying to bring yourself to where they are to help improve that relationship, and then they can do the same back to you. So kind of what Lisa's talking about, like, how many times have you been at a dog show, in a class, at work, right? And that first 30 seconds or 2 minutes, you're like, I don't like them. And you don't know hardly anything even about them, but just something in that initial interaction really just hit you in the wrong way. They were pushy, they were maybe rude, they were I don't know, fill in the blank, right? Too quiet, too shy for you, whatever that is. Dogs, I think too, they're much more forgiving, but I do think every living thing makes an idea of what they're dealing with very quickly. Are you scary? Are you going to hurt me? Or so we do it too, but we don't. Again, I think you're going to hear us saying this over and over again. We don't allow animals the same things that we do for ourselves and others. So part of this too is a big conversation of think about you and other strangers or people you know. What does your dog do in those situations as well?
Yeah. Sorry, my since I'm at a hotel, my internet is not the best. So, but anyway, as she was saying, like giving the dog that time to decompress and kind of acclimate to figure out what his surroundings are. I think we think we're doing the right thing by taking him to a parade on the second or third day, and just getting him out and about. And yes, that's required, and you need to get to socialize them. However, time is really important, and time to just do nothing and decompress. And it's hard. I had to do that with my little beagle. We did nothing for a long time because she couldn't handle more than that, and giving her that time made her go faster, and now she trusts me, and she trusts our home and the continuity of things. You know what I mean? And but it took a long time for her. It wasn't, and if you think about trusting other people, right? Takes some people takes a long time to trust. Some people trust right away, and some people, once the trust is broken, it's really hard to get it back, right? And dogs, it's very similar. That's why some dogs, once you break that trust, it's really hard for them to come back and decide, okay, yeah, this is okay for me, right? Um, and one of the things I wanted to chat about was what are some of the things that we do? Because sometimes it's like, well, how do you break your dog's trust, right? I'd like to get back to gaining it, but I'd like to talk a little bit about what are some of the ways that we break their trust, right? What are some of the ways? The first way, one of the ways is not being consistent, especially when you have a rescue dog or a puppy. They are starting to figure out their world, so they need consistency in their life. Like, you're always going to be there, always. There's some continuity, some sameness to their life, right? And usually there will be there. You're in the same house, you're in the same same X pen or same crate or whatever it is, but you really definitely need to be consistent on what you do, and the daily routine is really important for dogs that came from either a neglectful situation or a rescue, and puppies, because puppies don't know anything, so you have to put in that information. Wouldn't you agree that not being consistent on a routine, mostly like
Mhm.
being just regular consistency, that really helps dogs have the sense of trust and security that they know what's going to happen, right?
Well, routines and patterns create a sense of predictability. In that alone creates a sense of safety, right? Because if I know what's coming next, then I don't have to be concerned about how to respond, right? And so, with my puppy that I have now, he went through a lot of stuff. We flew on a plane, and it was just different. So, I just provided as much social support I could for him and didn't ask much of him and see whatever. And then now when he's home and stuff, I'm like, yes, you have to be crated. And sometimes during the day when everybody's out, you still have to be crated. And initially he was trying to buck the system and howling and carrying on. But now he's like, okay, I'll do it.
Mhm.
But if I'm consistent about, this is what we do. You come out of a crate, we go potty, you get to play a little bit, etc. And I think the routine is incredibly important to, especially any being, especially our worried pups, our worried dogs, because
Right.
they need to have that.
And that goes back to consistent rules too, right? If it's okay to get on the couch one day and the next day it's not okay, which one is it, right?
Hmm.
Lauren says, does inconsistent criteria for behavior and lack of information create a lack of trust?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. So it's like, imagine if you went to work, right? And one day they're like, nice job. That was really good today. And you're like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but okay, thanks. And then, tomorrow your person's like, we talked about this yesterday. I don't understand. Like, you really need to get it right. And you're like, you told me yesterday I did a really great job, and I thought I did the exact same thing. So right, that and I think when we're being super clear about it, inconsistent criteria for behavior, I want to be clear about that, because it's not about being a drill sergeant and like every time I expect a straight sit and your butt to hit the ground in the same way and you have to do it within 2 seconds, like, especially with a baby dog. That's not my criteria, right? And if you mess it up, right, like, let's say we're trying to go outside, right, and I'm expecting you to put your butt on the ground when I say sit, and I will open the door for you. And if you don't do it, I'm not saying too bad for you, you're not pottying right now. I might say, oh, well, that was terrible. What did you think about that? Let's try again. Can you sit? Right. And so as the dogs are learning things like that, I want to have a little bit of leeway while still expecting the same criteria. I'm also giving them feedback. What's right? What's wrong?
Right.
Okay. So
Feedback.
they're going to mess it up, right? You're going to get inconsistent stuff. But telling them like, oh, I thought you wanted to go outside. I guess not right this second, huh? What do you think about that? How about now? You want to try again? Look, here's the door. You want to go outside? Sit.
Yep. And I think the inconsistent criteria for behavior is it's definitely, but a bigger thing is the lack of information is a lot more. Like
Yep.
Joanne's example is spot on, right? You go to work and they're like, you did a great job today, and you do your same job. You next day you go in, you do the same job in the same way, and then you're like, that's terrible. So which one is it? Is it good or is it bad? And I hate to say it, but we do that to dogs all the time.
We do.
Right? We're like, okay, I went a perfect straight sit. Oh, yay, you did yesterday. you did it this, and they do the same thing, and it's like for whatever reason you decide, no, that's not what I really want. I want something else, and then it's wrong. So the dogs are like, okay, what do you want?
Or not even that, right? What if you're like, come on, hurry, we're going out the door, sit. Okay, yeah, come on, let's go, right? Yay for you. So, right, just like what Nancy's saying, but sometimes we are in a rush, and so we muddy that.
Mm-hmm. And I wish I could say I never did that, but I have.
We all do.
Um, and so and the lack of information is just so important, and giving them feedback, and that's why. And this goes into another realm. There's a school of thought for trainers that, oh, you never want to tell the dog no. No is also feedback. It's just how it's delivered and how you give it to them, or you know it, giving the dog feedback information for what's right or wrong is so important. They need that feedback so they understand what the rules are. And it because a lot, especially a lot of dogs, when they don't understand the rules and they're confused, it does create a bit of an anxiety. You'll create an anxious dog. You can make an anxious, just like a person. If, like Joanne says, if you have a job where one day you're doing great, the next day you're doing crappy, the next day you're doing great, the next day you're doing bad, then you have 2 3 bad days in a row. After a while, that is going to be very anxiety producing to go to work, because you're like not sure on today what kind of a day are we going to have. Is it going to be that we're going to be a good that we're doing a great job, or is it going to be another day that they're going to say how terrible you are? That is even the most. It will create a level of confusion and anxiety for that person going to that job. So we do that to our dogs all the time. So you just want to be clear. And the thing is, and this goes back to the for training, the criteria that you have for your behaviors should should be what you want, not what somebody else says it should be, right? So for example, you know, and this I see it in class as well. I want that it should look like this. Well, I don't care that it looks like that. I want, if I want a dog to loose leash walk and just never and be within 2 inches of my leg. Well, other people, that if that could be somebody else's criteria, that will never be mine. And doesn't mean mine is wrong. It's just I have a different criteria, and the criteria should be good for you and for your dog and for your family, whatever that may be. Like getting on the furniture. Is it okay or is it not? Whatever it is, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's like whatever it is, it's right for you and for your family. But don't say, okay, husband says it's okay to get on the couch and wife says it's not. And then the dog is like, okay, what is it? And I can't tell you how many times we hear that. My husband, yeah, he does it when my husband's home, but then when I'm, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, so you can see that that would create a state of confusion for the dog. You have to be very clear. And again, it doesn't matter what the rules are and what you want and what your criteria is, as long as it's what is comfortable for you and the dog. And there's nobody else, like for example, I was talking to somebody today, and in the years past, I used to have dogs sleep with me. Now that I've gotten older and my sleep has become a lot lighter, it is harder for me to have dogs sleep with me. So I no longer have that. So I don't let the dogs sleep with me. They sleep in my room by me, but they don't sleep on my bed because it interrupts my sleep. When I was younger, it wasn't a problem. But I'm going to be fair. The dogs that were with me when I started letting them sleep on the bed, they stayed sleeping on my bed until they passed away. I wasn't going to change it mid. I could have, but I didn't. I waited till they passed. Now, the current dogs I have now, I never taught them that it was okay, so they just never did it. And that's my new criteria. It changed, but I didn't do it mid. Some of the dogs that were there, they were older, and I wasn't going to cause any stress, and it was fine. And she was little, so it wasn't such a big deal. But now I've gotten older. I can't sleep well with dogs on my bed. So it's just, it's a choice, not good or bad. And that's what I mean. For people, it's like whatever you want and whatever your choice is, it doesn't matter as long as it's good for you and it works for you and for your family.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So other ways that we break our trust.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna. I know we have a lot of mix of people, but of the people who said hello, I think a lot of them do nose work. And like I said, I judged for probably 10 hours today, watching team after team after team. Um, if you're going to train your dog and you're going to be really good in training, and then you take it on the road to a trial, right? And your dog is giving you all of the behaviors that they normally give you, or even if they don't, right? And they're sort of like stopping and smelling and doing the thing. And you're like, I don't know, let's keep looking. Or are you sure? Right? Those types of things, especially for the lower levels, the younger dogs, right? Imagine, right? If you were learning how to have a golf swing, right? And like, perfect. I love it. Oh, don't do that. Yeah, that's better. Great. Looking good. Great. And you go to your first golf match, right? And your instructor's there and he's like, that doesn't look right. And you're like, I'm doing everything you told me to do. I know, but it's weird. Like, it doesn't look, I need you to fix it. And you're right. You're like, I don't understand what you're saying to me. So I think when we talk about competition, whatever it is, right? If you're going to compete the same amount or more than what you train, that's where we get broken dogs. And that's where we get dogs that lose motivation in sports and really basically like, whatever. I mean, I'll tell you what I think. And then you start to see sloppier and sloppier, or I told you once, I'm not telling you again because you didn't believe me anyway. So whatever.
Mm-hmm. Right. That is true. Because and nerves do play a part, right?
Yep.
And for some dogs, they can be a little more sensitive to your stresses in the ring or not. You know, some dogs may be more, they might think about it a little harder than the others, but it's really, yeah, you know, I'm doing everything I normally do. Why don't you believe me this time? And it's really hard, right? And then the other thing to add to that, and it's okay if you do that, but then if it's wrong or you're incorrect, you get upset at the dog and the dog pays for it. That really then disrupts the try, because it's like, I'm doing everything you asked and now you're yelling at me. So you can imagine the confusion, and then there's a trust issue, because then as you Joanne said, when you go to the next trial, you'll totally see that that, like, I don't know if I want to tell you about it. And you start getting some weird behaviors in those competitions, right? And that can be a you know, that can be a big, that can become a bigger issue depending on the dog and the temperament and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. So. And I'm even going to take it a step further, which is I trialed my new dog in a level up from what he's used to. So there was two things to find today. Well, in my happiness of like, he's doing a super job, right? And I don't get mad at him if we don't pass something or whatever. Well, there was a toy in the search area today, and I was like, "Ooh, I haven't introduced that in your search area." Oops. And so we were doing boxes, containers, and he comes out and he's like, "No, there's a donut toy," and he was like, and he jumped on it and squeaked it, and I was like, "Oh, what's that, buddy? Like, come on, let's keep looking." And he's like, "Okay," and he left it, and I was like, look at how good he is, right? And we rounded the corner. He's like, he slid into it, and he's like, meow, 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 and he's pouncing on it. And I'm giggling, right? Because I'm like, why would he not do that? He loves toys. Did I do anything to proof that behavior? Not a wink. Nothing. Right? And so I'm like, yep, totally on me. And you know, I'm cracking up, and I'm like, look at that. I know, but we're not going to do that. Can you find a box? He's like, I mean, okay, but like, what? All right. So, you know, he was hard to leave it. But I never got mad. I never got upset. I never even gave a sigh, because I'm like, that dog doesn't know why that's not an available resource to him when we're playing. So, I think about things like that in nose work, or even agility, stuff like that, right? Where have you had a P spot out there that they've had to work through, right? Have you had a toy? Have you had loud cars? Have you had, like, fill in the blank of whatever it is? Has your dog had that experience yet? On Has your dog had multiples of those experiences to be able to tell you how they're going to handle it and have you worked through it? If not, sometimes you're like, that was expensive, but
Yeah. It should be. And I think when I look at trialing overall or testing in whatever fashion it is, I think it's a matter of you go there with hopes, right? You shouldn't go there saying we're totally going to nail this. I'm so going to be disappointed. It should be information in regards to where you are in your
Right.
training.
That's
That's it.
correct.
That's all
100%.
that it should look like, right? And
Right.
if you're chasing cues, I get it, but it just means you have a little more work ahead of you to do. And okay, note to self, we'll work on that, right? It
Right.
shouldn't be anybody's fault for, if anyone, kick yourself in the butt. You're like, well, I can't really, blame my dog, right? It was my error.
Right.
But definitely.
Oh, Lisa, I'm curious, because you do day school, right?
Mhm.
How do you handle that? I mean, because right, you have a lot of over arousal, a lot of having to sit in the crate, a lot of working on exercises, and like, these dogs also may be home where the expectations are not there. So now we have trust and expectations in you in that space. Like, can you talk about that a little bit, and like, how do you communicate to people what you're doing and what that sort of stuff is at day school?
Well, basically what we'll do is we'll ask, thanks for asking about that. But what we end up doing is asking, what do you want to work on specifically? And then we assess the dog to determine what the dog's needs are. So even though the person's like, well, I want them to loose leash walk. Well, your dog has no impulse control. So we need to start there. Right. And so a lot of it is like hanging out, minor details, but hanging out in a crate and waiting your turn and being patient and being reinforced for it. So we start setting criteria right off and saying, this is how your day's going to go. And they all fall in line eventually. The new ones are like, blah, 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 we hate this. And the other dogs are like, you'll get used to it. And they end up falling in suit, because sometimes, what is that one saying where like, it's almost a contagion with the group, right? And then they start saying, oh, okay, we do this. And everybody's treated the same and stuff like that, and say, this is what we've worked on. So we might not have touched on the specific issue, but I also believe that, like anything, it takes time to grow a dog. It takes time to grow a person. It takes time to grow a dog. And that's why the routines are super important, right? Coming out of a crate, even. We all have our ways. You can't barge out. You have to sit or not push forward, depending on the dog. And it's really relative. But then, and what we end up doing is, in order to get it to transfer over to home, is we say, this is what we're doing. And this is why we're doing what we're doing. And we have some clients who don't necessarily do a lot of crating of smaller dogs, right? They have pens or whatever the case may be. But I'm like, still, you should be asking them to sit before you let them out, or making sure that they're not going nuts in a frenzy before they're let out. There's this little guy. He is adorable, and he gets away with a lot. And so we fight every time about the crate. And after a while, he's like, fine, I really don't like this. And she's like, oh, I don't really crate him that much. And I'm like, but it's important to have the same requirements in terms of impulse control, whatever that is, because he'll get crazy and scratch and stuff. And I'm like, don't allow that, right? Make him think about his emotions and his behavior at that time. So yeah, but it sometimes it can be troublesome. And honestly, it depends on the people and what their expectations are. There's some people that say, I want my dog not to jump on my kids. It's 5 months old and I want it fixed in 2 weeks. Good luck. That's not going to happen. Not with tons of pressure. And it's not something that I feel comfortable doing. So.
And one of the ways that we also break, just goes kind of along, is boundaries. I think people think that letting the dogs have a lot of freedom and a lot of ability, it actually is very anxiety producing and stress producing when there's no boundaries and no guidelines, because you don't know from 1 minute to another if this is going to be okay or not. So setting boundaries is so important. Going back to routines and this is okay and this is not okay, especially for those of you with young dogs that have young puppies. It's really, really important that they have a lot of boundaries and they understand what those are. Because, yes, as they get older and more mature, those boundaries can be, those you can
Expanded
expand
or change.
expand it or change it. But if they and because that's why they're like, oh, it's a puppy, it's little, it's this, it's that. As then it becomes, you're gonna raise just an adolescent, a difficult adolescent, and then you go through that whole process. So setting up proper boundaries is so important when they're young or when you get a new rescue
Right.
dog home, right? It's so, so important. And we've all, we whether we rescue or whether we've got a dog from a breeder, all our dogs that come into our homes, all the three of us, there is a lot of there's structure in some of our lives. It's different, but it's like there's structure. You have to be, most of them, everybody in all three of our homes have to be crate trained,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And it does, and you have to get there, right? Roscoe, he's getting better. He's better at being confined, but he didn't go into a crate right away. He couldn't. But now that Joanne was actually mentioning, oh, he might be time to start trying that and see how that works. He might be getting better. He might be getting closer. So has it taken her a while? Yeah. But there's still been boundaries. He still has to be in an X pen, or he still has to be confined in some kind of way. And so it may take us some time to get there, but the boundaries are still there, and there is some structure in our home. We eat in the morning and the afternoon. The time might be different, but this is our normal routine, right? This is what we do. And I think a lot of people don't set boundaries. Oh, but he loves other people, the jumping up, the charging out the door. He just loves to be outside. And there is no boundaries and no structure. And that can be very, very difficult and for dogs when they don't have that structure in their lives. It gets really complicated, and then they grow up to be very naughty adults,
Mhm.
dogs, and then it's just harder to fix it instead of giving them that information, because that's all you're doing is giving them information. It's no different than somebody that comes to live with you. You know what I mean? You this is how we get up at this time, we do these kind of things, and there's a different structure that you have to kind of acclimate to as you uh, join that situation, right? Like when I went into the military, lots and lots of structure. There's a way to do everything. It was completely different for me, but it was also very clear. I knew exactly what was expected, so there was no question ever, right?
I would have
So
run away.
AWOL.
I'm like
In
too
the
close.
break.
Too many things for me.
yeah, right.
I
But
think
go ahead.
I think one of the things Nancy had said about, like, with Roscoe and pushing too fast too soon, right, would have broken the relationship, the trust in the
Right,
relationship.
right.
So you have to be, and I think where there's a question up here that we can get to, but
Mhm.
watching your dog and making sure that you're moving at the dog's pace. In regards to, in his situation, I think it's more of a safety issue, and who knows what the history was, right? So she heeded that from him, and then she went ahead and made the adjustments necessary to get him to that point. It's not how fast you get there, it's how you get there, right? The quality is more important than the quantity.
Right.
Yep. And I actually have a Roscoe story that actually leads right into Lauren's question. So I'm gonna read her question, which is, what about protecting or advocating for our dogs when they are in situations that they feel vulnerable or fearful, etc., and they're offering behaviors that are not being respected? So I'm going to tell you how damaging the crate is for him. So I do know the history. He was adopted out as a young puppy to a family with three young boys, mother, father, and then in-laws that would come over every day for like to watch the kids until the parents got off work. So what happened was he had to spend his day in the crate. Totally fine. That's an acceptable thing for a dog. He would come out of the crate to go potty when the in-laws came, and whatever happened, I heard stories, but I don't know anything for truth. But whatever happened, and they told me, they basically had to catch him and shove him
Mhm.
into a crate because he would, didn't want to do it. This was daily. And then it got to the point of anytime they had to put him in a crate, literally, I'm talking catching, shoving, trying to barricade him because he was in a panic trying to get his way out.
Right.
So when I got him, I put him behind a gate in a room and was like, dear God, please don't eat anything in the room, right? I did try and work the crate the first day, right? Because I don't know you. I don't want you loose in my bedroom. You don't know my dogs. So I tried a little bit, and just looking at that crate, he flopped around like a fish. It would have been like someone with a fear of heights or a fear of snakes or something like that, and just basically bombarding them, pushing them near the edge of the Grand Canyon or dumping snakes on top of them. He was about to have a heart attack. It was that traumatic for him, right? So I'm like, okay, never again. Like, you're good. I hear you. So we started making, accommodations for him. All right. And thank God he never tore anything up. So he got the spare bedroom with a gate. And then I started with an X-Pen, an open-topped X-Pen. He could handle that. This was like months later, right? Then he can do now a crate in the car. He can do a crate in the house, an open door crate. He'll go in and lay in one of the crates with one of the big dog beds in it. Anywhere else, anywhere. At my training building, I even had an open crate now with a small X-Pen. He still will not even go in the open crate at the training building. And he barely has any room besides a dog bed to go get it. Even putting cookies in there, they'll be there an hour later. He will not. And so back to Lauren's question, right? What if you don't advocate for that dog? What if you don't listen to them? What if you don't do those things? You can make lifelong, I even call it more than fear and panic. You can make lifelong, super traumatic PTSD events, depending on how bad that situation is for that dog, whatever it might be. So I think all three of us here have had these conversations before, which is, I can apologize to a human later and tell them the story of why I was a crabby bee, right? Or why I snapped at them, or why I yelled at them, or why I did whatever it is that I did. I cannot go back and explain that to my dog. So I would much rather get super snippy with a human being to protect my dog and the trust that they have in me. Right. And then put my dog up, get them safe, and go back to the human and be like, I am so sorry. Like, that was not, I didn't mean to be rude, but really my dog, blah, 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 fill in the blank, tell the story.
Right. Always advocate for your dog.
Yep, always. Excuse me.
Because you can, that is a surefire way to let him hang out there and allow them to deal with, all kinds of stuff, that is not being honored. And then you can interrupt it, advocate for the dog. And then if you feel that it's important, you can go back and help give the dog more skills to be able to handle those situations, but not in that moment, right? In that moment, you're going to advocate for the dog and do what's best for the dog, and maybe go back and if you feel like it's important that he's more comfortable with whatever the situation is, then you can put the skills in to do that. And this weekend at the workshop I was giving, I did mention that, there's a lot of trainers that are teaching a lot of management and not teaching them dogs a lot of skills. And I think there is a time for managing when you have to protect your dog and make sure that they're okay. But I think giving them the proper skills for those situations is really important. And again, they might take time, like in Roscoe's case, the whole crate thing. It's gonna, he can be in a crate in a car, which is pretty big, because before that was really difficult for him. But it's gonna come in time, and when they're able to handle it. And then, but she's also trying to give him the skills to be able to handle some of the stuff, right? Some of the worries he has in some of the situations. So yes, you're definitely you want to advocate for the dog 100% all the time, and you can go back and train it later. But you need to, if the dog needs to, you need to interrupt it and then talk to the person or whatever, or figure out another way to make that situation in the future better for your dog.
Mm-hmm.
Right. because that's a big way to break trust. The other thing, so and then lack of boundaries is like I said, it's a big one. And then the other thing is if you are, I think those are the biggest ones I see. And then also, and this goes, and I know this goes into a big, huge debate about stuff, but also a lot of harsh punishment and yelling. Um, a lot of, harsh compulsion training comes from a different place. Not that it's, it works for some dogs, but in many cases, the dogs back in the day, with the old Keeler method of training, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, you would then, you know, choke up on the collar and push the dog's butt down for them to sit, right? And that would be the way we taught sit was taught a long time ago. So the dogs aren't really learning there because you're physically manipulating that's what you want. And then over time, what happens if you think the dog understands you? As you're doing that, you tell the dog to sit, right? And let's say a few weeks later, you tell the dog to sit and he doesn't do it. What do? Is you give them a correction on the collar and to get them to sit and push their butt down. So you can understand if some of the dogs didn't really quite understand, or if our timing wasn't great with that particular methodology, how confusing that would be hard. Like sometimes this happens and it's really stressful for me. Um, and something bad's going to happen where it becomes a very difficult or very stressful thing. So you definitely want to really think about, like, when you're going to punish your dog. So an effective punishment should come pretty quickly after the transgression, not later, and it should be pretty clear of what it is. And many times, most of us don't have the timing to be able to do that properly. We just don't.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that to think about, right? Because I want to. If my dog doesn't do a behavior I'm asking, or I'm wondering why, I try to think of why he's not doing it. What is the reason? Did I not? Clearly, I didn't do my job as a trainer to get him to understand what I'm asking. Like my puppy not to jump up. Clearly, I have not done a good job of teaching him not to do that. So it's on me. I have to figure out another way to make it clear to him that jumping up on people is a bad thing, right? Yelling at him and all that stuff is not going to help it. I need to give him the information. Somewhere he's not connecting the dots onto why that's not a good behavior. So that's a really good example because he still does it. And I've tried to work on it, and it's like he's still doing it. I go, okay, clearly what I'm doing isn't working. He's still not understanding what I'm asking.
So I think the other thing I do want to point out is criteria, right? Because sometimes we jump steps. And I think when we jump steps, that also affects your relationship in terms of trust, because they can't trust what you're saying, right? So, for example, there might be options. Let's just take the jumping up situation, right? So maybe the criteria, you first start saying 4 on the floor gets the cookie, right? 4 on the floor gets a cookie. I approached, it's a cookie on the floor, etc. And then eventually you morph it into 4 on the floor, then a sit, a cookie. But some people will automatically expect the dog to sit. So I had a lesson today with a puppy that was with me, a chocolate lab, super nice dog. He needed just clear information, but super excited to see me. And I'm like, have him on a leash, start putting cookies on the floor. And I'm just going to talk to you guys as we're standing here until he settles. And then finally he's like, oh yeah, I remember we're supposed to sit all the time. Because I reinforced him like crazy and saying sit is the best thing ever. And I like my dogs to down, but they have kids and stuff. And I needed to get something because the down wasn't necessarily working. So I took what worked for the dog and broke it down, right? And said, okay, how about this? How about this, right? And I think a lot of times when we're doing this, sometimes we jump too many steps. So lumpers versus splitting. And I think that can also be really difficult for that building and maintaining a trust in your relationship for training.
Mm-hmm. I have one thing, but I want to ask Lauren for some clarification first. What about taking things away from the dog? In what context are you correcting them, or you're just like, you're done with that, you've had enough, we're not playing anymore? I'm just curious. So if you could answer that. One other thing to kind of talk about, and again, this is a little controversial. So, positive training, I don't know why we can't do anything in moderation. It's like sometimes we get an idea and we have to like take it to the nth degree, right? So there's been like some joking posts about like I want you to groom my dog, but he does cooperative care, so he has to give you permission to do a toenail. And if he pulls his paw away, that means you have to wait, and it might be 20 minutes, but then and you're like, that's not realistic. And there are some people who are using cooperative care. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking it. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's amazing. I think it gives dogs a say in the things that happen to them. However, right? I also think if that's all you do, and the dog always gets to say yes, no, and we never put a little bit on there, like, I know it sucks a little bit. I'm gonna only ask you for a tiny little bit, and I need you to give it to me, and then we'll have a cookie party, or I'll let you down, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
If we never give those dogs that opportunity and they only know the super trust, the super you only do things when I say so, imagine how that can break trust if they get a laceration and have to get stitches, if something bad happens to them and you go to the vet. They're not going to ask, right? The vet will be kind and do the best they can, but they're there to treat the dog along with everybody else's dog. So you don't get 3 hours for the dog to say, okay, now, no, wait. Okay, now, no, wait. Right? Mm-hmm. So I think even when we talk about positive training, we can break trust as if we don't prepare our dogs, just like our kids or ourselves. Maybe you hate the dentist. You got to go sometimes, right? Like it's part of the thing. You get your inoculations, you get your physical, you get medical care, right? I don't enjoy going to the lady doctor, but it's part of annual health, right? I need to do it to make sure that I'm safe. So, you go, this is going to kind of suck today, but it's only like 20 minutes. Let's get through it and we'll be done. So,
yeah. So Lauren said, when no criteria has previously been established and the dog is not wanting to give the item to you, is this an area that trust should be established? Yes. So, and especially if you have no, meaning if the dog doesn't know to drop it or leave it and he's learning it, like with a young dog, like he's still in the process of learning a leave it or a drop it, and they have something they shouldn't. So, and this is where, and again, to Joanne's point, sometimes it's taken to another degree, is I do try to trade. Like, okay, can I have that? I try to do a trade. I don't do that forever though. Mm-hmm. If it's something it's immediate, I try to get whatever the item is back from the dog and do a trade. But then if that's going to be a persistent problem, given that it's a golden or a lab that's going to take stuff, I want to teach them a leave it or a drop it. So that way we don't have, because what happens is a lot of people are, come on, give me, and they just do the trade thing all the time. It's like, no, I do the trade thing when the dog, like in Lauren's case, there's no criteria, then I'll trade you. But then I'm going to teach you. You're just going to not, I'm going to teach you a leave it or a drop it. We're not doing the trade thing all the time. We're doing you're going to leave it or drop it when I ask you. So, but in the interim, while you're teaching that and while they're starting to understand that, then I would definitely do trade or somehow do something else where they can drop that toy and in that case you are trying to establish that trust. Like, okay, you're going to lose this, but you're going to gain this, right? And so that way you can maintain the trust. And then you're going to definitely start working on leave it or drop it so that it doesn't continue to be a trade game all the time. Because some of those dogs will be like, well, I'm going to grab a toy so I can get something else or, a cookie or whatever. So that's one way to manage it. Because that's basically the trade thing is a management tool. It's not a training thing. Because to me, to a dog that's if they have something that I don't want them to have, I should be able to tell them drop it or leave it, and they should do it, right? But again, if you're talking about a young puppy, they're not going to be consistently doing it. So you might have to do some trade in them, or resource guarder. Right?
Drop
or
it.
that.
So, but going to that point of the leave it, trade it, give it to me, right? I feel like there's a trustworthy way that you can do that, right? So if I come into the room and I'm like, oh, no, you leave it, drop it, right? That just forceful way of doing that automatically creates a no.
It's
I'm
mine,
not
right?
right. It's mine. So I take a very I exaggerate myself a lot, right? Like, what do you have? Can I have it? Can you please bring that to me? Right. And it's sort of like this conversation
Right.
of let's be done with that. Okay, come on, we're gonna go over here now. Can I please have the toy? Right. And most dogs, if you have developed the relationship, even if you don't want to use drop it, leave it, most
Right.
dogs are like, oh, okay. Right. It's that whole that type of thing, or give me that just naturally they're like, no,
Yeah. And I'll give you an example. I used it with my Mambo, my puppy, because in the morning I want to put the collar on so we can go to work. So he grabs a toy and he's like, I want it. So I can't put the collar in over his head with the toy in his mouth. And I'm like, can I have the toy so that I can put your collar on? He's like, no. I'm like, come on. I go, I hold the toy and go, can you, give it. And when he releases it, I put the collar on and I'm like, oh, here you go. Here's your toy back. Right. So it was not, so now it's become part of the routine. He grabs a toy. I grab the collar. He gives me the toy. I put the collar on. I give him the toy, and he runs around with it. And it became a not confrontational situation. He's like,
And
oh,
why though? Because he knows he's getting it back, because there's predictability in that interaction, right?
right.
I'm not trying to trick you. This is what happens. You have it, you give it to me, I do this, you get it back.
Right. And establishing that is helpful when they have something you can't have them give. Because my young teenager, darling little puppy gets a lot of stuff that I'm like, what is that now? So I am living that at the moment. So it's like, okay, can bring that to mommy. Let's go. What do you have? What do you have? I kind of take the same approach. It's like, okay, can you give it to me? And I usually use give it because it seems less harsh, I guess. Come on, give it. Oh, good boy. I go, oh, you gave it to mommy. Okay, let's go get a cookie. And he's like, oh, all right, that wasn't terrible. Because in that case, he's not getting whatever he has back, especially if it's money.
Nice.
So, because he does that because he's now an adolescent. So I'm like, okay, got to work through that, right? So he's not, keeping it, right? And it's a process as he gets older. I realize this will not last forever, and he's not going to do that forever. But for right now, it's something that we are working through because he's young and he's just, all of a sudden he's decided that that's what he wants. It's like, look what I have. And I do try to keep enough toys and all that. And so most of the time he does pick up his own toys. He leaves a lot of the other stuff alone. Every once in a while, he won't. So, and it's because my husband, God love him, doesn't put stuff away. So,
Lisa, how do you trade?
Well, basically, I first of all, I do a lot of management where I don't let them have access to things they're not supposed to. They'll get them on occasion or whatever.
Just the big trainer.
What?
I said, well, aren't you just the big trainer there? No, I'm
Yeah, right. So I do manage. I try to manage as much as I can. But yeah, there's occasions where, like Riff, he'll like to take the tissue because he likes to tear it up, and I kind of encourage that. So he's like, anytime, like if we're sitting on the couch, my husband's like, flossing or whatever, then Riff jumps up. He's like, what do you want? Can I have it? Can I have it? Can I have it? Like, right in his face. And then my husband puts it down and then he goes snatches it and runs. So then I have to, trade it. But, and I'm like, hey, look at this. I'm like, look what I got. I got something over here. So I take a toy and we trade for a toy. So I make it about the toy I have because when I do play with my dogs, I do a lot of toy play and tug. And so then they'll drop what they have and come back to me. And I'm like, oh, did you want this? Can you sit? Ready, set, get it. And they get it and we play. And then I go grab the thing and put it away. Right. Mm-hmm. So I just trade for something else. But
right.
it's the same idea, but I think a lot of it sometimes too is we forget. And my husband, like, he forgets too. Obviously, I mean that happens
Mhm.
when you live with somebody, right?
Husband forgets a lot.
Yeah. So we, it's a trade thing. Or if it's something I know is not going to kill him, like I don't get overly concerned about it. Like the tissue, I'm like, all right. My one, she'll grab up. She's been successful counter surfing, yay me. And so I try to make sure everything's gone. But my husband will, cook dinner and then put the napkin, whatever he used, so
Mhm.
there's like sauce on it on the table. And she'll get up there and she'll be like, she'll pull it down, and everyone's standing around. Yeah, she's got it. And then she tears it up and leaves it, and somebody else grabs it and they play with it. So there's pieces all over. So you pick your battles, right? I'm like, okay, nobody's dying, so okay,
Yeah, and
that's
they'll poop it
that's
out as
yeah,
I
right. It's paper. It's not like So
right.
I have
Yeah,
that battle with the recycle bin. I'm like, you know what? I don't care. Like, if it makes you happy, I'll sweep it up. Like,
yeah. And that's the thing, right? Uh, and that's what, again, it's picking your routines and picking your boundaries, right? What's okay and what's not okay. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever suits you. Um, and building that trust so the dog like knows that, okay, this is it, building trust and having some routine and some structure really helps everybody feel more comfortable and again, dogs that tend to have a little more anxiety tend to be really thrive in those in the more structured environment. Not
mhm.
that not that everybody has everybody has a different level of structure, but those folks that kind of going back to the child rearing, right, where the kids will get, like the cooperative care, it's like, okay, it's going to take 3 hours to do the nails. It's like, well, that's tough, right? Because that also in and of itself can be anxiety producing for the dog, like that constant, that long drawn out. We're going through this whole process, and I don't know, and I want you to. So it just becomes this big production that doesn't need to be, that we just made it a big deal, and if we just kind of got through some of that, and of course in a positive way, but um anyway, it's so one of the things that we want you to think about, and again, is building is what you're doing, building trust, and in some cases, and depending on the breed, sometimes we can violate that trust, and the dog will give us will still give us trust again. They'll you can regain it. Other dogs, just like some people, you'll never regain that trust again. They're always going to be suspicious, and they're always going to be that, right? Because that's just, and again, it's very dog dependent, not breed, it's dog dependent, right? So it's something to think about. And also, the other thing that erodes trust a little bit is the lack of positive reinforcement, meaning sometimes it's easy for us to say, don't do that, don't do this,
Mhm.
stop doing that. But sometimes we also have to give them that feedback of, yes, that's what I want. That's it. Yes. Right. So that again, the clarity is there for the dog. Because I think sometimes I've seen some people, it's like, oh no, he does everything wrong. He's just a dumb dog. He does this, all this. And it's like, no, he does a lot of stuff right. Or you, in training, you see it sometimes. He does a perfect, I don't know, a perfect front. And then you're going to do one more.
Mhm. Push it.
And then it's not quite right, and you end on that, oh, that wasn't good, right? That just creates so much confusion and stress for the dog.
Yep.
The one thing I did want to say, I know Ronnie had something here about feedback. It's not diarrhea of the mouth either, right? It should be, yay, good job. It should be okay, puppy. La la la. I think sometimes people do it, and you see it a lot more in trialing, where it's just constant talking, and it almost interferes with the flow of what's happening. So, be aware of what you're saying and why. Like, have a purpose versus just random ramblings, I guess.
Right.
Oh, well, I was going to counter that though. There are some dogs. I have
That
one of
need it.
those too. He has pointy ears, right? It needs to be almost like when we're out trying to do something, it is a constant barrage of yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no. Like, and I'm using different phrases and stuff, but I hate it. I
Yeah.
hate it with a passion that I have to do that. It's not how I train. And
But
he's
it's
like,
relative to the individual,
it
right?
Right.
is.
It is
It
relative
is.
to the individual. So feedback is relative.
He needs a lot of it.
Am I right?
Great, great. No, no, not that. Not the good. Yay, come on. No, don't do that. Anyway.
Yeah.
Uh,
And Ronnie said she has a forever trade. Yes, because yeah, with the and that's true, Ronnie, right? Sometimes if the dog is really adamant about or tend to have a little bit of those resource guarding issues, right? It's really important about like not creating that conflict where it's where you're going to erode trust in in another area of your relationship either. So I
Mhm.
totally get that, right?
yeah. So let me just read that because I know not everyone can always see the comments. Depends on where they're coming. So Ronnie
Yeah.
said, I still have the forever trade, but it got to be a delayed trade reward. There is no taking it away because he will warning snap. I don't see an end in sight. How can I get to no reward trade? There's no yelling to negative action involved. So again, right? Resource guarding. I have the same thing. So my resource guarder, because we have a trust in each other, there are things like paper or toys or things that he doesn't find that important. Can I take a bully stick? That's one. I can't do that today without a trade. And I'm okay with that. Right? I don't need to
Right.
push that. That is such a high value resource for him that I better come if I want that. And I still do try that from time to time. And we do, can you give me that? I will give it back. Can you give it to me? I will give it back. Right. So the need to hold and protect decreases, even though that first interaction, it's going to be for me as it from what I see as a lifetime trade on high value items, and that's okay too. It's not worth risking a bite to try and
Right.
get something
And
from your
and
dog.
Right, and to be honest, Ronnie, that is a violation of their trust. If the dog
Yeah.
really feels that strongly about it and you're gonna insist on taking it, he's not gonna trust you versus, and like I said, what you can do when they have something and this you would do with because I did it with my own little Rizzo when I got her, she was a pretty hardcore resource guarder. So I did a lot of if she was chewing on something, I would pass by, toss a treat, and so she got to be feel a lot better about me coming by. And then towards the end, I was able to take away pretty much anything, but it took a long time. But I wasn't going to get into a contest about trying to
Mhm.
take it away from her. It was always pretty light, and it's better than risking because that then creates a whole nother lack of trust and a trust issue that you're not you're not predictable and you're going to come and take that away from me, and that you definitely don't want to violate that situation because that can become pretty difficult down the road. So
Yeah, I know with my guy, he's a paper stealer. He loves the recycle bin like paper, and so it just kind of became like, hey, what do you have? Can I see it? And he's like, no. And I was like, okay, can I watch you? Can I see what you're doing? And he's like, that's weird, but okay. And just hanging out with him and not trying to take it for a minute. And again, I don't want him to eat paper, but it's not going to kill him. So
Right.
it built our relationship. So sometimes if it's not going to kill him and he stole some paper, like who cares? Sit with him, be like, can I see it too? Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Where'd you get that? Like, is that fun? Can I touch it? Right. And so sometimes it's just seeing if you can play too, right? Can
right.
can help build that. But
Yep. And Lauren said about positive feedback, even when they're just doing nothing, just a pet good boy when they're just laying down or not doing anything. Actually, Lauren, they are doing something. They're showing relax and calm. And yes, you definitely want to feed that. Want to reinforce that. That is a good. And that, like, if the dog automatically sits and lays down by your side and is calm, oh yeah, I'll reinforce that all day long, especially if it's a young dog, because I want him to know that I like running around being naughty. I don't like. So it's clear information, right? You lie down here by me, you're gonna get petted and loved, and what a good dog. And if you're not, other things might happen, and petting may not be one of them, right? So, and that gives them really good information and great feedback. Like, this is okay, this is not okay, this is okay, this is not okay. And again, it builds like, okay, he it's clear this works. Because for me, I always reinforce if they're lying still and they're being good, I pay it. I reinforce it with petting or belly rubs or whatever. You do that, it's gonna be worth your while to do it.
Mhm.
But now the game is game plastic bagged in pieces. Oh my god. I know. And it's hard because for me, like my husband tends to leave stuff where he shouldn't, and so I really have to watch him like a hawk so he's not you know like you said, my puppy has gotten into paper towels. How do I know it? Because I find it in his poop the next day. So
You
I
should
told
try
my
some
husband.
positive reinforcement on your husband.
So I told my husband, "Did you have a napkin last night while you were having dinner?" "Yeah." "Did you know what happened to it?" "No." "Well, I can show you." Very colorfully, it came out of that kind of came out of our puppy's butt. But anyway, anyway, so thank you all for tuning in. I just wanted to. This was a really interesting, and I know I probably should do a whole one on how to build trust for trials and nose work specifically, because that seems to be where there's a lot less. Yeah, tell me about it, Lauren. She
I'm
said
all good.
raising dogs
Thanks.
would be a little easier. Raising dogs would be a little easier without husbands. I'm like, ain't that the truth? Because um, but doing uh, um, building trust in a trial situation, because that's where sometimes it's violated. Like to Joanne's point earlier in the hour about the dogs doing everything that you've taught them in training, but in trial it's different, and so you could see how that lack of trust can be very impactful going forward. So maybe that'll be another sports building a trust in sports training. This is just building where a dog is going to trust you and is going to listen. But I think when the trust is broken, it's just like a human being. It's like, I don't know, but I don't know what you're saying is going to be a good thing for me. So and there's a just a little bit of a disconnect in that situation with the dogs, right? And that lack of consistency. Anyway, I hope that you found this helpful. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week.
Good night.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
night.